What's good, YouTube? It's Mo. Today, we got an exciting topic. We're going to be talking about who would you rather be, John Wick or the Equalizer? There's only two uncancelable, untouchable actors in Hollywood that have immunity like D Rose in Chicago, right? You're not touching these dudes. Like nobody there, they can't do no wrong. Keanu Reeves and Denzel Washington. These two OGs have built themselves and have built their reputation so well that if any tabloid comes out on them, who's lying? That's that's how protected and guarded, and how dear we hold these guys close to us, right? The cool thing about these two guys is they play some of the most ruthless characters in film history. We got John Wick and the Equalizer. This past week, I felt like I should do a comparison on both of these characters. They're very similar in a sense. And I really wanted to get the most accurate idea on what kind of characters these guys were, in the movies. And, I went through Equalizer, which has three, series, and then John Wick, which has four. When we first talk about John Wick, everybody knows the story of John Wick, an assassin whose wife was taken by cancer early. And, she happened to leave a puppy to remember her by. And unfortunately, these thugs decided to rob John Wick and kill his dog, right? So let me put it into perspective for you real quick. Your wife, the love of your life passes away, and for her to remember you by, the only thing that she left to you was a puppy that she went out and got herself, right? Her last gift. She can't give no more gifts to you, all right? And some careless ass thugs decide to come rob you for no reason, beat you up, and kill that dog. People think that John Wick was overreacting, but when you really think about it, the shit that he did was warranted, right? He had a reason to be that mad, that's something that he knew that he couldn't get back, and they completely took that shit away from him. That's the quick background of John Wick, if you guys didn't know. Now we talk about the Equalizer, played by Denzel, Robert McCall. I never realized an old man could be so deadly. That's how vicious Denzel was in Equalizer. And the crazy thing about it is, most of the fights, it didn't even look like he was trying. The crazy thing is, this is like a common occurrence with both these characters, John Wick and the Equalizer. Robert McCall as well too. The Equalizer, he also lost his wife and is just in the process of trying to find a new life, right? With both of these guys having their history in violence and killing, it's crazy to see that those were put aside by their wives, and once their wives were gone, it's like, they're back in it. So first thing we're going to talk about is the skill set of these two. When it comes to John Wick, it's not just about the gun fu, the martial arts that he knows, like beating everybody's ass in hand-to-hand combat. What makes John Wick different is the fact that he's able to continue fighting and continue. He's just able to have the durability and the endurance to keep fighting, which is something that I haven't seen in any type of assassin, right? He's gotten some of the craziest injuries and is literally still putting up a fight no matter what, and ends up beating all the guys that were sent after him. He's so skilled as well that when he fights, everything is like he's in flow state. He's not even thinking when he's fighting. That's what sets him apart. He's basically a guy that's just extremely talented and is an anomaly when it comes to assassin. Like, when they talk about this man in the movie, everyone knows his name. Call him
Baba Yaga.
Boogeyman. Obviously, like that's his name in the movies, because he's really someone that no one in that universe wants to fuck with. Like I said, when it comes to the skill set, Robert McCall is one of the most deadliest guys because he's basically like Batman with prep time, right? If you give this guy enough prep time, you're finished. And even in some cases, he doesn't even need prep time. All he does is check his watch, put it in a timer for a minute, and that's just sick. Like, if you use it as a game to see how fast you can kill your opponents, there's something wrong with you, okay? And Denzel literally does this every single time in the Equalizer trilogy. He doesn't rely on his strength, because he's a lot older, right? He relies on his experience and his wit and strategy to be able to take his opponents down. And someone that knows every step that you're gonna make, you're not beating him, right? You're just not beating him. The mind of these two characters are very different, okay? When we talk about John Wick, he's moving in a direction of vengeance, right? He started out because obviously they took away his dog and his memory of his wife, and that's what got him back into the loop of his old ways as an assassin. And as you guys know, the High Table, they have the rules where if you make a bond with them, you have to keep fighting, you have to abide by the rules. And he finds himself in this perpetual loop of just trying to survive, right? And he gets in too deep where it's hard for him to leave. So, John Wick, unfortunately, is on the chopping block for his entire life because of one incident. And, that was starting from vengeance. With the Equalizer, he reminds me more of a superhero, that's looking for justice. All his victims are thugs that are doing people wrong, right? Hurting people and taking advantage of people. And then since he obviously knows he has the capabilities and power to take them down, he takes it upon himself to serve justice. And the name Equalizer, right? He balances everything out. So with him, he also cares a lot about his community and people that he's built relationships with, right? So he fights for a reason. He has a purpose and on why he goes back to his violent past. And that, in a sense, I believe is a lot more sustainable than someone like John Wick, who is really just trying to stay alive. That's the thing about him, right? Let me show you some of my favorite scenes from both movies and their top moments. When we're talking about John Wick, the iconic motorcycle scene. Like, is that shit even possible in real life? Could someone really do that much damage on a bike? Like, that shit was crazy. Now, my favorite scene with Equalizer was when he went to that restaurant and showed these guys the business. It's always the guys that underestimate that get done the worst. And once Denzel looked at his watch, it was in the story, right? He packed them up pretty quick. So when we're talking about the legacy and the cultural impact of both of these characters and movies, the more you watch John Wick, the more it becomes less of a gory, violent film and more of a chill comedic film, right? A lot of the scenes in there is comedy when it comes to John Wick, and you can see Keanu having a lot of fun with it, and you don't really take the fights as serious as some other movies, right? And that's the great thing about it. When it comes to John Wick, nobody else could have played him as good as Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves has been a staple in Hollywood for the longest, and the reason why he's so uncancelable is the fact that he's one of the most humble, high character guys in Hollywood. There are so many instances of this guy being a stand-up dude and donating and just being someone that doesn't look at himself as above others, as a lot of these Hollywood actors often do. With his good-natured soul, which comes from, his very difficult past, he's able to inject that into John Wick, where we have the nicest guy you could ever meet with the most brutal person you could ever meet. And that concoction makes John Wick and what makes him stand out apart from everyone else, right? You can tell that John Wick is deep down is a good person, right? He's just in a difficult situation, right? So when it comes to the Equalizer, Denzel has always been able to convey charisma and likability in all of his characters, right? He's an experienced actor who knows what he's doing, and he's always had that OG vibe. Like, he's always been that respected black actor that's always been there, that everyone gives praise to, who also has a high character and has never been in the tabloids. If a tabloid came out with both of these guys today, everyone's gonna be like, all right, who lying? Right? That's literally how unproblematic these guys are. When it comes to Denzel and playing the Equalizer, he's able to convey that with Robert McCall too, and give us that sense of a father figure, who's shows tough love, but is very caring, right? But not weak by any means. We're down to the final question here. Whose life would I have? And the question is a fucking no-brainer. Like, who the fuck would want to have John Wick's life, if we're being honest here? Who would want to go through that shit every single day with everyone on your head? You're over here looking over your shoulder, not knowing when there's gonna be raps for you. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to live that type of life, right? John Wick is cool, and I know that he can survive almost anything, but fuck that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not worth it. Amazing fighter, probably gonna have the most fun with him in his line of work, but it just doesn't make sense to choose that. On the other hand though, Equalizer is the way to go, because if I can do that type of damage as an OG and no one can fuck with me in that sense, like, that's the route I'm gonna go. And I'm also not over here fighting off hundreds of dudes every single day because they got a hit out on me, right? And they got millions on my head. I'm not gonna go through that. So with being the Equalizer, just give me some prep time, and I'm gonna make it happen. The downside about being the Equalizer is his age, right? If one crucial hit, it's a wrap. So all in all, I'm obviously still gonna go with the Equalizer, even though John Wick is one of the most notable, notorious characters and most dangerous assassins. His life is just not worth it, period. Okay, he's over here struggling to get out of that life, right? He doesn't even want his own life, so why the fuck would I? So with that being said, both of these series are great series that you guys should watch. If you love a lot of action and violence, there's plenty of that in these movies. And if you like both these actors well too, it's something to definitely take a look at, right? If you guys have your own thoughts about who you would rather be and whose life would you take, comment on the bottom. Appreciate you guys for watching. Till next time.